a relationship with God requires faith. It's not something that I can objectively, logically prove to you the same way that I can objectively prove that, I physically exist and am here in this room. However, even if you accept the atheist framework, the real flaw in atheism is that it doesn't exist. It's not real. And maybe it could be for an individual, but it certainly can't scale. This is just demonstrably true. You can prove this empirically. And if you look at the most, it's like look at college campuses, say liberal college campuses. It's the most atheistic place you could find. I mean, nobody is a devout. Okay, there might be a few Christians there, but by and large, nobody is a believer. It is permeated by atheists. And then look at wokeism, and you go, oh, that's just another religion. It's just another, it's the same exact thing. Articles of faith, blasphemy, holy texts, all the characteristics of a religion they have, except it's not a religion with thousands of years of stability behind it that's built advanced civilizations. It's a brand new religion that has no possibility of building civilization because all it does is tear everything down. And it's real easy, to come in and point to things that are oppressive and say, I want to tear them down, because almost all of existence is oppressive. And so you could certainly make a case for like marriage. Have there been marriages that are oppressive? Sure, no question. So let's get rid of marriage. Churches, have there been churches that are oppressive? Sure. So let's get rid of churches. Let's tear all this stuff down without having an ounce of humility and thinking to yourself that like, oh, maybe there was a purpose for these institutions. Maybe we're not just tearing down oppression, we're also tearing down the building blocks of civilization. That might not be a great idea. And there seems to be no interest in even thinking about that. And so that, like, I completely agree with you. I mean, it's like we ran this experiment in secular atheism to see what it would lead to. And it's disaster everywhere. And a lot, particularly of young people, are waking up to that and going, oh, yeah, maybe we need to re-examine this whole thing.
Secular religion is missing is salvation. There's no salvation. There's no redemption. It's just cancel and dismantle and destroy and up and just flip the whole table over. I mean, they say it out loud, right? The entire thing, whether that's USA or it is capitalism or it's the entire West, just the whole thing just needs to be torn down. I'm not quite sure what they propose it's replaced with, but they're not really into tweaks. And yeah, another problem with it all is it's just so negatively framed. And that's one of the things I've always found. I'm not one of these people who have some story where I used to be a lefty and then I went through some, red pill moment and I shifted over. I've kind of always by Western standards, I've always been more right leaning for sure. And part of the reason for that is so much stuff on the left is it's all about negative framing and seeking out the problems, right? Like if I like to ask progressives in particular, what would the world or what would society have to look like for you to be conservative? Like what would everything need to look like for you to just go, you know what? Cool. I'm okay with this. Let's maintain the status quo. And they never have an answer, right? Like it's all based on finding, if there's not a group that's being oppressed, let's just invent one, right? Let's literally just invent a group. Let's just make stuff up. If you can't find the instances of the racism and the homophobia and the xenophobia and whatever, like let's just dilute these terms and start throwing them at everything. And, I call that label inflation. And I think it's a big problem because there's so many terms that now don't mean anything. I'm sure you've been called far right. I'm sure you've been called a Nazi. I'm sure you've been called a white supremacist, a racist, a homophobe, a transphobe. Like none of it means anything. It's just like, okay.
All those terms plus a bunch more, like all if I'm very critical of the government of Israel, so that means I'm a self-hating Jew. I'm very critical of the war in Ukraine, which means I'm a Russian propagandist. It's like these terms just like, and they're so dumb. It's like forget even like that they're inaccurate and that it's like your point is well taken that you're inflating these terms so that they mean nothing at this point, you know? But aside from that, it's like, dude, if you have an IQ over 100, don't you just like, at a certain point, you're like, this is boring to me. This is like genuinely boring. This isn't interesting. And one of the things that has been, you know, like with the people being labeled as racist, let's say, for everything, even like people like Barack Obama and Michelle Obama will talk constantly about racism in America. It's like the country elected you twice, you know, and the first time by a landslide. You had record high when Obama first started he had record, I'm saying record high, it might have been the second highest presidential approval ratings. Bush after 9/11 might have been the highest. But when he came in, his approval ratings were up in the high 70% for a while. We had as much of a consensus as you could have when Barack Obama first got elected that like, we're all rooting for him. Oh, great. There's this really brilliant, young, attractive guy who just became president, who's the best public speaker I've ever seen. Let's hope he's a great president. That's where and then you're going to turn around and like call this country a racist country. Well, then what does the term mean? What does you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, if you found out that in the middle of Nazi Germany, super majorities of the country voted for the first Jewish leader, you'd be like, wait a minute, this conflicts with my understanding of what was going on at the time, but from what I understand, the supermajorities would not have supported a Jewish person. I thought that was the whole thing. And yes, it was. And so right now we're in this new world. And one of the things that's really interesting, I'm sure you've noticed this dynamic as well, but one of the things that happens when you inflate these terms to the point of meaninglessness, when you dilute them to the point that you know, anybody can be labeled with these accusations, is that the accusations lose all meaning. And now it's funny as you watch them that's half the reason why they kept calling Donald Trump a Nazi so much, is just that racist had already just been used too much. They called Mitt Romney a racist. So I guess we got to think of something bigger, you know, but then they go to Nazi so much, you're not like, now that term doesn't mean anything. So what are you going to say? You're almost out. And it does seem like one of the fascinating things about this latest chapter is that the terms just aren't working anymore. People are rolling their eyes. Even half of the people like who were on the progressive woke left are now rolling their eyes at this stuff because it's just too absurd. And one of the things that is a very interesting dynamic that I think opens up a lot of possibilities is that, you know, like as you mentioned earlier, like the difference between 8 years ago and today. Well, one of the major differences is that if Donald Trump had a rally in Madison Square Garden in 2016, there would have been tens of thousands of protesters outside. I mean, it would have gotten violent for sure. You would have seen clashes between Proud Boys and Antifa. This isn't happening right now. And that's a really interesting dynamic that I think is going very under-examined and under-reported, is that the young lefties who could be counted on to be kind of shock troops for the regime 8 years ago have kind of gone AWOL. They're not really doing it anymore. And that, there's a lot of factors that I think have led to that, but that opens up a lot more possibilities because now you can do things without getting this like resistance right in front of it. You know what I mean? Like, whereas like back in 2016, 2017, you know, anybody, not even a right winger, but someone like Jordan Peterson speaking at a college campus was going to be drawing thousands of protesters. That seems to have calmed down a lot.
Today's episode is brought to you by Sambrosa, the best way to get your 8 hours of rest. I met the owners of the company while they were on tour with Tucker Carlson, and their nighttime syrup has been a game changer for me. It's really effective to get your quality rest at night. Sambrosa contains a natural base of 7 organic herbs, honey, and a small amount of antihistamine. It's effective and soothing with no harsh chemicals, no high fructose corn syrup, no artificial colors or dyes, and it helps with nighttime allergies. Sambrosa is a family-owned company who share my values of faith, freedom, and integrity. I've been using their products since before they started sponsoring this podcast, so I can personally vouch for its quality. My listeners can try Sambrosa today and get 10% off by going to sambrosa.com/Zuby10. That's SAMBROSA.com/Zuby10 for 10% off. Try Sambrosa and wake up ready to embrace life's opportunities.